Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
Great. Well, let me call to order the Cottonwood Heights Community Development and Renewal Agency Business Meeting for Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. My name is Mike Wickers. I'm the mayor of Cottonwood Heights, and as the mayor, I serve as the chair for the Community Development and Renewal Agency, and the members of the city councils are members of the board. So our first item of business tonight is going to be some Canyon Center updates. Our friend Chris McCandless is here, and we're excited to have him come up and give us some updates on the Canyon Center development. Hi, Chris.
Hi, everybody. You want my name and address? I used to make people say that all the time, and I often wondered why. Thanks for having us. First, I want to introduce Mike Williamson. He's part of our owners group at this
Hi, Mike.
point. Great guy. Been involved in real estate development, big part of Harriman's development team that was out there with the Sorensen group. And Mike's got a little bit of a spreadsheet that there were some questions last time we were here about values and stuff like that. So I thought I'd put it on paper. Mike, you want to pass those out? The spreadsheet really is how much money we spent so far, bunch. The podium, the top line of this spreadsheet shows that this isn't necessarily values, but it's the kind of money that we've actually spent or others have spent as part of the project. And so the podium unit that Mike's now an owner in, we sold that to a company called FSC, if you'll remember that conversation, for $6.850 million. And the nice part about that was it was cash. And so we don't have a whole lot of financial pressures.
So the podium is where the
Office
currently
building.
unbuilt apartments or condos or.
That's the office building, podium that's just due south of the.
All the way
hotel.
south on the.
Yep,
east side.
that big slab of concrete, that's the podium. The podium also includes third level of parking and the first level of parking and ownership, and it's all subject to the parking plan that we've got. Infrastructure improvements, put in $3 million. I don't remember how exact that is, and so I put draft for discussion purposes only at the top of the page because it's not accurate, but it's pretty close. Parking garage, that's really close, actually 14.8. Attorney and other entitlement costs, that includes our architects, was 850. Marriott's Hotel, the 149 rooms, 25 million. I was told higher than that by the owners, but I didn't feel like I wanted to disclose exactly what that was. 8 Settlers, 6.8 million. I hope you guys have all eaten there. Any of you guys not eaten there? Okay, that's good. Canyon Center
Don't eat there as
condominium.
often as you do, I don't.
Pardon me?
eat there as often.
Well, I have an embedded interest in certain aspects of it, so I try to support them. Canyon Center condominium units 2D and 2E. They are the units that is directly south of 8 Settlers. And that's where Kevin Gates is going to move his operations. Under construction, got sheetrock, mud and tape, and looks pretty good. It's going to be a neat little place for him to reside. Downstairs, underneath the hotel.
So that's between the hotel and,
Yes,
okay,
there's a building there, and he's going to occupy the upper floor. And we continue to get LOIs from restaurants who have no experience, no money, want us to spend the money to help them. We're just a little nervous about that, right? So we'll leave it at that. Just south of that, the Rooted people have leased and started paying rent on the space underneath, which is unit 2E. And they've got a drink and juice bar and an office environment that they're going to be putting in there. haven't started construction yet, but their lease has begun, so they're paying us payments. So from that perspective, we're happy. Be nice to have it done. Marriott, single family detached residential homes, that's just an average, about 13,600,000. That was done by, who was it? David Weekly Homes. Thanks, Mike. And then the apartment home, just the property only, has a value of about $9 million. We sold it to him less than that. Love to get it back. And the Cielo restaurant is about $4 million, what they actually put into it. That's what I understand.
So the
So-
apartment home and the single family are on the west side of the river.
That's correct. That I keep hearing from the owner of that property. It's going to start any week now for the last couple of years. It's been a while. I hope he's successful. I spoke with him about 2 weeks ago. His challenge is interest rates, just like everybody else's. It's gone up 2.5%. And that on a roughly a $34 million project is a whole bunch of obligations on a monthly basis. I get it. I wished he'd have started it 2, maybe 3 years ago. So the amount of money that's been invested to date in the project, about $84.4 million, which is what gives you guys all that tax increment. That's kind of cool. What's going to happen in the future? If you approve of our concept to make yet another modification to the office, we believe that one level of office works on a condominiumized basis. We will sell those units. So 5,000 square feet, we'd sell them to individual proprietors that would move in. We've had some interest from a number of people to that extent, but we can't start it or bank or finance a project with only 5,000 square feet of 80,000 square feet. That doesn't make sense. Residential condominiums, the upper 3 levels, done our market research. We think it's pretty exact for a rough guess, right? 34,157. Apartment home complex, that number at 245, I believe, came from Mark. 34 million. Then the community park. Now the assessed value of the land, don't tell the assessor this because I'm already paying too much in property tax, was about 650,000. That's probably low for an acre of property in that area. And then I expect or anticipate the city's using tax increment. I think you've got pretty close to 600,000 today in tax increment that's been collected. So it'll have a value of at least $1.2 million. We get it all done, hopefully before I'm passed, of $163, $164 million project. We think that works pretty good. So the office market. The office market's getting more difficult. Part of the reasons is that everybody's gone, well, first we had the pandemic, now we had everybody working from home, then we have all the vacancies. And now because of all the vacancies, the financial market has said, well, in 5 to 10 years, when all these commercial loans come due, we're not going to refinance them. That's coming up. And so the scariest thing for an office building owner is how am I going to refinance multiple millions of dollars in notes where the marketplace decides you're not going to get financing. That's pending. And I believe that will happen probably in the next 3 to 5 years. And it'll make it even more difficult for office buildings to make things work. Now, we have one office building that's working really, really well. We're at $19 a square foot on average, full service, which means we have a net of 11. In order for us to make an office building at the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon work, I got to get 32. There's a big spread. It doesn't really seem to be getting much better. So,
One of the office buildings in that development is it
pardon me?
Canyon? One of the ones in Canyon? City?
No.
Right.
I'm quoting from West Jordan. It's an inferior marketplace, but don't tell the West Jordan people I said that. They're nice folks and they're working really hard. But to that end, we've talked amongst ourselves and done enough market research that if we went from 2 levels of residential to 3 levels of residential, we can survive the single level of office space and hopefully wait the market out. But I think there's a marketplace for a few residential and office condominiums. And so our request is that we change it, part of our request, I think you guys have got my email and everybody's read it, right? Is to request that we go to 3 levels, residential condominiums. These will be for sale products. They won't be for rent. I think we'll build a nice community with that stated. To that extent, parking for residential is considerably less than, as we talked about last time. I think I can park all of the 3 levels of residential on the top level of parking, P3. I'm thinking that it's a 1.5 stall per unit plus the surface parking. I don't need any of the other 2 levels for parking. So the second level parking, which is in the hotel space, directly below would be managing the 1 level of office space. The bottom level would be open then for community residents, because we know that they have a parking need. We'd have to modify that shared parking plan because we don't allow overnight parking in the parking structure. And I think that's primarily what they're looking for, which actually works real well with the shared parking plan. And that's part of it. The second part of it is we're not going to make the December 2024 deadline, just not going to happen. We've been trying really hard. I've been working on this project since 2011. A long time. I won't quit. We'll still continue to work on it until it's successful. But longevity is the case.
Chris, can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
So I know we talked previously about, you have an HOA that manages currently the entire project. Is that right?
There's 2.
There's 2 HOAs. Okay.
Uh-huh. So
So I know we talked about possibly putting into the development agreement on the residential office space that a percentage of required owner occupied. Do you remember that conversation? Is that still something that you're willing to look at?
yeah, I think they'd all be for sale.
Okay.
Units, and we'd require that a certain, we can only rent 10 of them by contract with the hotel. And that's in our development agreement, and that's in our contract with the Marriott Hotel. And so,
How many units? Are you talking?
I think there's going to be less than 30. You know, final designs, it's about $500,000 to design the building. So I'll make sure we're going to get to do it before we pull that trigger. And we've got some preliminary designs done. And I think we're going to end up with about 28 or 29 residential condominiums, 3-bedroom to 1-bedroom units, give it a variety. And I think there's a great marketplace for it. I have a guy who's heard about this, wants to buy several. And we've had a number of people that have called and said, if you're selling condominiums, we'd be interested in being a purchaser. They'll buy one, live there for about a month, and then go home.
What is an apartment home complex? Is that separate in addition to
No,
residential community?
Yeah, the apartment home complex is the one that is across the street, the 140 units.
That's the Mark Maybe
Yeah,
project.
correct.
So,
correct.
all right,
It just sounds nicer as apartment home instead of
that's
just
the real,
apartments,
okay,
right?
all right. Now-
Market
now I'm-
stuff.
So they're contracted, someone buys one of those condos, if this all goes through. The max short-term rentals, verbals, Airbnbs would be prohibited from,
I don't think it's allowed in this zone. And it's not allowed by our contract with the hotel. We can rent 10, but it's full-time rentals.
and that's dictated.
Correct. And I'd have to check into the language we have in our purchase contract with hotel guys to verify that, but I'm pretty sure
I
that's
think
it.
that would be a concern
Sure, sure.
going up to.
One
Yep.
could be owner occupied, 10, yeah, that would work.
Either way, they're for sale, which gives us a better chance that we'll have more residents there than transient residents. That's my thought. And just looking at the marketplace in general, I see a lot of homes that are bought and lived in for short periods of time. Oh, excuse me. The nice thing with regards to these is they could have their vehicle in the garage in their designated space and never have to move it until they come here. So it's really a fairly limited impact on the community. Our preference is to get full-time people. I don't think that's realistic for the whole crop, for the whole group of them. Here's what we're willing to give as consideration, which you guys already know. First, You guys have got about $500,000 in tax increment fund going towards the park, which once upon a time, I think we had it estimated cost at about $750. So if you started today, you'll have the rest of the money and the plans done and approved to build the park. The original plan was that we would use the park site, that's why it's still in our name, why we still own it, for construction staging for the office building. And talking with our friends, we think that we can do that with a third of it, which is primarily the hill. It gives us access and storage capacity. The flat part, which is where the rail park is going to be. And a lot of that flat part that's up there on the south side is the cul-de-sac that we'll build and 17 parking stalls. We think if we save that, which is a very small portion of the park, plus our property for construction staging, and use all of the P3 parking for construction vehicles and material storage, along with that, what do we call it, the secret plaza area. We think we can manage construction staging and still deed the park to the city now, so you guys can get towards planning and building the park. We'd like to see it done too, right? But we still got to be realistic. We can't helicopter all the materials in.
Well, did you bring a diagram so that we could take a look at exactly how this would be laid out?
So it's pretty easy to see. If you look at the Rocky Mountain power boxes that are about 2/3 of the way through that particular site, that's where the land lease would start. And we would use our access off Kangen Center Parkway for deliveries.
But would you build a new driveway?
Yes,
And where exactly are you proposing the driveway?
it would be construction delivery access only off of Kangen Center Parkway on that property that is being preserved. And I didn't bring a diagram, but I can send you one pretty easily.
I would like, I'm not up there enough. I don't know where the boxes are. So
Yeah, sorry. I'm up there too much, I guess.
Google Maps has some parking that goes about halfway up.
That is the hotel designated parking. We have access through that road that goes into the P3 access, the third level parking.
Without a laser pointer or something, I really can't follow what you're describing.
Chris, I've got it
Do I
on the
have a laser
screen.
pointer anywhere? Or do you want me to go to the board?
I've got it on the screen if you want to point it out.
Let me do that. Okay, stop. This is actually the
And when would this be completed?
It's going to take some time to go through the development agreement, the taxing entities. My guess, I'm going to look at Shane. Best case, it'll take us at least 9 months, and that if we hit the ground running tomorrow. If the city says okay, then we'd pull the trigger on the design of the building and dual track the work for the design of the building, in addition to at the same time moving forward. I don't think anybody's going to complain too much, because most people understand circumstances of why office buildings have decreased in their success over the last several years with COVID. You know, pandemics don't come around too often, and those impacts associated with that. So it'll take 2 years to finish the building once we get that done.
And may I add, Mayor, on this? So, yeah, the process is pretty significant. We're talking about it tonight. If we receive direction to move forward with an amendment to the development agreement, it means that amendment would need to be drafted and prepared, including all the details. We would probably come back once we have those details and have another conversation And then after that conversation, if the direction's still moving forward, then the negotiation of the taxing entities is where real heavy lifting occurs, including us as a taxing entity. But county processes, all of the Canyon Center, or not Canyon Center, the Canyon School District and the other taxing entities, we would have to negotiate interlocal agreements with each of them and get those approved along with us. And that takes quite a bit of time, and that's the process. And so once that occurs, once if we get all the interlocal agreements completed and we make that final approval, it is about 9 months or a little bit more depending on the timing, and then we'd have to implement from there.
I
That
think
makes sense.
9 months is probably optimistic, and that's if we're all one big team and working extraordinarily hard. And we're willing to put out that effort, if you guys agree. I think the condominiums on that project would be an asset to the community. I think the traffic impacts are less. I don't know about the tax increment, but I think we're considerably shy of a total investment below the 164 million that we suggested in the RDA budget, original budget. And so we actually make about the same amount of tax increment that we were going to make with the office building. And that's largely because we spent more money than we anticipated. And the assessed values are going to be higher than we anticipated, which creates, even though we've got a residential portion, the project now being given that 55 or 45% reduction. I never get it other than on my own house. I have to pay the whole thing. So I don't pay much attention to it.
45.
But I think it works to that extent, because if we want to continue to be good partners with the city as best as we can only do what we can do, is we'll deed lot 1 to the city. Now, as soon as we get moving forward on the process, that because I still own the property. So, but we'll need that small portion up by the cul-de-sac so that we have the ability to build the building, or it'll be a concrete slab for a very long time because there's no way you can build anything on it. So we need to have that as a long-term lease for staging area. For area residents, I think we can put out 30 parking stalls, real rudimentary numbers. Please keep that in mind. 30 parking stalls for area residents to use. We're going to charge them admin and overhead expenses for their lease. I don't know what that'll be because right now we're just paying for it all. All of the admin, the maintenance and stuff like that, we're just paying for it. And then we got to pay taxes on top of that. So it's been a fun ride, right? The last part is that we'll give the city back 2 years of our tax increment. Our tax increment on an annualized basis is about 90,000 now. Understand that the FSC LLC company that owns the podium is not the original developer. That is our concession or gift to the city. Says thanks for the cooperation and let's try to get this done. I'd really like to see it done before I'm 6 feet in the grave. Oh, I'm getting older. I think I started this project in my 50s. Holy cow. I'm upper 60s. I don't want to be in this project when I'm in my upper 70s. Anyway, that's all I've got. Just questions from you guys.
Yeah, if I may, I'd like to understand. So you're asking in essence for staging, in essence through 2025.
I think it's actually 2026. So our development agreement says we got to have everything done by December 2024. And I'm looking for a 2-year extension on that time frame. You're moving the clock forward the way we analyzed it. It'll take us through the rest of this year and probably into part of next year in order to get the development agreement and all of the interlocals amended as to what Tim said. And then once that's happened, if we are moving forward, like we said, on the construction document, in a little advance of the approvals, that's a little scary. Then it'll take us 2 years to build the building. So that's what we're looking for.
So the residents in that area, I had a meeting with them 3 weeks ago, and needless to say, they expressed their concern over, how long are we going to be looking at a dust bowl there? And even, so I have a couple points. One of the things they wanted me to make sure I brought forward is that this free parking, method or whatever you want to say that has been offered, it sounds good on paper, but it's been, according to them who live nearby, a real negative, because they would rather see it managed on a daily basis rather than what has happened in many months or in recent years, where people are utilizing it. They even understand that the Marriott promotes the idea of large vehicles being able to come and park in that area. They have a lot of problems with what they see people doing down there, and just generally they feel a lot of discomfort. So they made it clear to me that they want that to be addressed, where, again, if there's somebody, a parking attendant who, you have to pay to come into this area and it's managed, this is something that maybe you could meet with them if you would be willing to. I know it would mean a lot to them because they have not felt satisfied with the signage and the management. So that's kind of one thing that they wanted me to make sure that I shared at this meeting. And then again, I'm kind of struggling with if we do design a park and try to build something where the south edge of the acreage, has trucks going through, etc. I'm not quite following how we would design and build and utilize, which again, they're so anxious to see this happen, as they've wanted it to happen for years now. And they do understand the market changes. And I'm not trying to be unsympathetic to your plight. But I think to satisfy my understanding and ability to communicate it to those that live around that area, I think a diagram and maybe a little deeper illustrative, and possibly a meeting that they have a chance to interact and get their questions and concerns answered. I'd love to see that part of the process. I don't know, Mayor, if are we still on the timeline hoping to make a vote in August on this? Whoops, excuse me.
No, but let me interject just a couple of things. So to Chris's credit, we actually mentioned to him in a meeting that, hey, the residents are really interested in getting this park, started and completed. So everything that he's doing is trying to help us speed along the process to get an improved park for our residents. And so this wasn't just something he came up with, and he's just trying to figure out, he to his credit said, hey, look, I'm still going to need a stage. Let me try find some ideas. So these are just initial ideas for him to stage while he builds his building, and at the same time get a park done so that our residents can start enjoying it. So that's where that came from, was our request to him. So I really appreciate him going out of his way to do that. And as far, Tim, I'll let you answer.
Yeah, as far as the process, and we probably won't be able to move forward with the park until we get this amendment finalized. And like I say, it's a long process to do that. So it would still at minimum be into next year if everything gets approved before a park would be. I mean, we can move forward with design and things such as that now and get ready for it, but we're talking next year, because we would not be able to move forward until there's a final approval on the interlocal agreements and the CDRA board considering that. So just keep that in mind as well. So really, you're going to see, and I appreciate the comments, Councilmember Burrell, about we're going to need to see the diagrams, the plans. If the direction is tonight to move forward with this amendment, then the plans, all the documents related to the tax increment and impacts on tax increment, the extension of the timeline, all of that will need to be included into a document, an amended agreement document that we would move forward to all the taxing entities, but it would have to include descriptions and site plans of these things as well.
I mean, preferably with some kind of topography, because
Sure.
we appreciate that you'll have to build a retaining wall. And I think the more that we can understand, the height of the retaining wall and kind of how this can, in a rough, I'm not saying that every inch needs to be, but, in standing above it and trying to imagine trucks going through there and yet, still create a park that could be enjoyable for the residents to access. Also, exactly where the roadway, the new driveway would be as it relates to the existing weekly townhomes there, and that it would feel safe and, all those elements is,
Glad to do it.
yeah.
And if I may add one other thing, and I think in the site plan and the development agreement amendment that we're talking about, we would delineate that all on a plan where the
Create
areas would be,
exhibit.
where staging would occur, where the park area would be and where that access would be. We delineate that as part of the agreement for your consideration.
We'd want to put up some kind of a construction fence with a visual barrier between the park and that staging area so that it can be less disruptive. And then, of course, the park's going to use mostly in the evening. You guys still going to build an amphitheater? That'd be really cool. I like the idea, but I'm not a city councilman, so you guys get to make that choice. But it'd be fun to have that done. I'd like to see the vision done, finished. But
I've got a couple of, Tim, I guess I'm gotten lost somewhere on what details exactly is it that we're going to the other taxing entities to get amended? That's gonna take the time.
The two big things are the new land use configuration. So changing
that-
from an office building to an office/residential component.
So why would that be? I thought that would be under the auspices of the CDRA.
It is the CDRA, but keep in mind, all the interlocal agreements that were approved were based on a certain configuration of the site, residential and office component. So with that modification, we would need to have each of the taxing entities be comfortable with that. But probably the biggest thing for the taxing entities will be the timeline,
You're
the
looking at-
additional 2 years.
You're looking at extending the tax increment funding timeframe.
Right. And that's going to be probably one of the bigger things that they'll have to consider as well. But those are kind of the two major components that they will have to approve.
Now, the 2-year extension I get, the other part, that's struck me, okay, I thought the land uses and stuff were kind of in there, but I guess that is germane to them. So, I mean, okay, moving on from that, if we say then what we have is
great place for a
a-
tennis court. Yeah.
we've got a great big piece of concrete and a dirt pile that you own that stays there for until you can figure some other feasible way to build on it.
It's challenging.
Do you know the time frame on the apartment home complex?
I've called in about once a month and he has legitimate challenges like I do, so I won't say
All right,
anything.
that's the one that was just.
It's the rise in interest rates. He told me the other day that, and I call him all the time, because I've known him. I'm pretty familiar with Mark.
He knows your
and
cell phone number.
Bug him. I do have his cell phone number on speed dial. There isn't really a speed dial anymore, is there? You just say call so and so and it rings the
But I
number.
mean, I suspect that goes into too, because that's a fairly large piece of undeveloped.
Yep.
Ground, just like the much smaller piece.
Yeah, we've offered to buy it back about 100 times. He's not biting on that at all. That's a great piece.
You got a
But,
great deal apparently.
but he does have to have it make financial sense. And when you have rates rise up 2.5 points, that's a big deal.
Our original CDRA budget for this whole thing had it at the $160 million range.
I don't think so. I think it was in 140, but I'll check and
I was gonna say that,
let me check.
that number seemed higher, but
I'm pretty sure it is higher, but I don't want to shoot from the hip. I'd rather get the original document out and then just take a look at the budget and see what it said, but I'm pretty sure it was about 140 million. So with the new residential component, I think we'll be at 164 million, but we have a new residential component and I'm not sure how those units will be treated. If they're rented, then they don't get the deduction from what I understand. So 10 of them will probably be rented because that's the limit based on our contractual obligation with the hotel. So 20 of them will have to be owner occupied, period.
I don't know if it might be a question that I'd be interested to see how that budget that we originally approved is marking up against the situation.
Yeah, if I may add, that's a key part of this, because if we go from a full commercial, and we've talked about this, you go from a full commercial, the increment becomes different if you go into the residential. And that's why the taxing entities are gonna wanna see, they're gonna wanna see that. This is an investment they make, if they're gonna extend it 2 years, they're gonna, including this taxing entity, which is the CDRA. And so those are things that you are gonna have to be described in the amendment with some arguments on why, and then they're gonna have to consider it, and we are too.
I imagine with increases in value, they might even do better than they thought they were back then.
Maybe. I'm sure you guys are gonna want me to call Jason from LIREB and get an update on the CDRA budget based upon the new projections and find out exactly what we think it's gonna be. Okay.
Yeah, well, Chris, thank you. Any other?
No, I am curious about kind of the comparison. I mean, because you're right, this has been going on for a long time. We've seen all kinds of budgets, all kinds of projections, all kinds of, it'd be kind of nice to know, reconcile with that to where we are today. I mean, conceptually, I like what you're talking about. I understand, but it would also be, I'd hate to see it stagnate for 5 to 10 more years.
Sure.
May I ask one question? I understand that, office, Class A office spaces, that's a hard, been a hard sell and all that. Have you considered, using the lowest level, multi-use or the, MU level? Have you considered any kind of services, like a combination of services and cafes and restaurants, maybe smaller space, going down a road like that, especially with it located near a public space that, maybe you could get the flow of residents spending money in there? Conceptually, is that even a possibility?
Turn on the microphone. That's actually really good strategy planning, and our concept would be to request commercial uses, which would include those type of facilities. We still have one surgical dentist firm that wants to take half of that floor. And the other 2 units would easily be something like that, service oriented, especially with 3 residential floors of condominiums above. It'd be great to have that there, but you can't build 80,000 square feet on a 3,000 square foot tenant. Got to have something bigger and better than that. We talked to our lender about the 3 levels of residential. He won't even look at, even with Kevin's now one of the owners. He's the majority shareholder in FSC, so pretty well-heeled guy. Even with him, they wouldn't do 2 levels of office and 2 levels of residential. 3 levels, they said they're interested.
But the exterior size of the building's not changing, or
Nope.
you're not going up.
No.
I want to make sure that's very.
Unless you guys would let me, but I don't think anybody's gonna let us go to a
there's-
5th
I-
level.
I've been through that.
So have I.
Well,
So
one thing that I liked is you mentioned sole proprietors and giving them an opportunity to have a space in our city, and I think that's important. At this point, Mayor, is there a formal motion that needs to be made?
We just need direction from the
I think
count,
if there's-
from the board.
Yeah, I think 3 of us, with showing support is enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I think
So I should call Shane tomorrow, get reacquainted. Okay,
Well, thanks, Chris.
I'll move it forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, item 3 on our agenda is a gravel pit community redevelopment area discussion. So we're going to have Mike Johnson, our Community and Economic Development Director, come up and lead this for us for a moment.
Thank you, Mayor. So we were approached, you'll remember a couple months ago, the gravel pit, the northern gravel pit developer, Rockworth Development, had approached the city with interest in establishing a public infrastructure district on that site. That's a method of applying additional mill levies to the property taxes there that would help fund and pay for public infrastructure as they build out that site. As they've done further financial analysis of construction costs and interest rates and all the challenges you just heard about, they have approached us again about pursuing a tax increment financing, a community reinvestment area on top of the public infrastructure district to further help with the development costs of realizing this development. I'll walk through just a quick summary of this so everyone's reacquainted.
Just so they're looking at possibly doing a infrastructure extra tax on themselves. But apparently that's not going to be enough. So they also want to look at some TIF as well.
They're interested in both, yes.
Together or?
They're separate tools. One the council approves, but the city has no risk on. The PID is just council approved. And then they establish a governing board.
Doing
It's
both
managed.
or
Yes.
one or the other?
Both.
Both.
And then the CRA obviously requires approval by the agency and all the taxing entities in the process we just talked about. So the project site is the 20-acre northern portion of the gravel pit. The site was entitled through the Plan Development District zoning tool in August of 2021. I have some background just to illustrate that they have been working on things since then. After that approval, the developer began preparing engineering plans and civil construction plans for the site. Part of that included site-specific fault trenching, in addition to the trenching activity that had already been done. As you'll remember, they did find additional fault trenches that required them to decrease the size of their apartment building. That came through a council process where they amended their ordinance to allow for minor reductions in development intensity without going through that full PDD process. That was back in February. The council approved that. So that decreased their apartment units from 325 to 300, but that took them a while to go through that legislative process. And the developer has since cited market inflation, interest rate increases, construction cost increases, everything that we've heard a lot of times that have increased dramatically since the original development approval. Like I said, Rockworth is currently pursuing a PID on that site. They're in the process of reviewing the governing documents. We got direction to proceed with that. It'll come back to the council. That's still in their court for review. And they're now interested in pursuing CRA in addition to that. The city has previously been directed by the agency. I think it was a different makeup, but to establish a CRA to start that process on the gravel pit. It was the same time the direction was given to do the same thing on the Hillside Plaza area. So that was in like 2020. We started that process. It got delayed due to COVID. We got back at it. And what we found out is the way, especially some taxing entities like the county are set up, is they really need to see a detailed plan in front of them to be able to weigh in and make any progress on the creation of a CRA. At the time, Rockworth had not expressed interest in participating in this. The city's vision was to establish the CRA for the entire gravel pit site, including the property across on the west side of Wasatch Boulevard where the old mill is. The goal of that was to proactively create this tool to be able to better shape the future development that takes place on that property by offering tools and incentives to meet the city's vision. But that got tabled because we didn't have a good, what they call a but-for analysis, which is without taxing, the difference of what's possible with tax increment and what's possible without it. Trying to quantify that. They really look for development costs, performas, real hard numbers so they can make an informed decision on that. So because we didn't have that, we lacked that at the time, we tabled it, but that direction was given. So the next steps would be presenting this to the agency to see if there's interest in starting this again, utilizing some of the numbers we've now received very preliminary information from Rockworth on their but-for analysis for their 20-acre site. I think the city would not want to separate the 20-acre into its own CRA and have the other part of the gravel pit as another one down the road in the future. So if we were to proceed, we would recommend just proceeding with the whole project area as it had been established previously, but utilizing the numbers and the cost impacts that we have from Rockworth now to try to assist in making that that pitch to the various taxing entities. So next steps could be scheduling a future presentation in a CDRA meeting with Rockworth, hearing from them directly. They have, I'm sure, a ton more numbers and experience with this that they would be interested in sharing with you. And then at some point, direction from the agency on whether to basically untable the CRA for this gravel pit area, resume meeting with the taxing entities to see if we can make more progress at this time. That would involve preparation of a new CRA budget and area plan, all of that information that we need to take forward. So that's what I have tonight. This was just an introduction because we've had this meeting with Rockworth, I think last week. Wanted to get this in front of the agency for to introduce it to you and get any feedback.
That's the question.
Yes, go ahead,
Kind
Scott.
of in light of what we just discussed and going back and talking to all the taxing entities, if we're looking for your extension. In the initial, if we're going to include the entire area, is there a way to make that flexible enough so that we're not going back to talk to all the entities all the time? I mean, if it's 5 years or 10 years down the road where the rest of that's going to be developed, you probably don't want to. Can you initiate the tax increment for different sections at different times and for different time frames?
Need to address that? or-
Yeah, please do.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
What we would likely do, like Mike said, is now that we have numbers from a specific development that is proceeding, then we can potentially extrapolate some of those numbers into what the rest of the build out of the area would be based on that, and then do it in a phased approach, but have it approved all in one area.
Does it all have to be at the same percentages if we did it that way?
It would have to be the same percentages of whatever happens with the development. So for example, if it were 25 or 75% of the taxing entities or 75% of the tax increment going towards the project, it would have to be for the full area. But what we can do is negotiate development agreements in stages too. So 15 years from now, if there's a new development, that's up to you as a CDRA board on whether you would contribute 75% or 50% or whatever. These are not easy processes, by the way. I want to emphasize when you go to the taxing entities, this is far from a slam dunk at all on these. There is a lot of scrutiny, and that's why we brought this forward back before the pandemic. And some of the taxing entities said, we're just not interested right now because we don't see numbers, and that's the end of it until we have some of those. So these processes are pretty in depth.
There are a lot of, some of these entities want to see the housing component before they'll move forward. There's lots of different things that have changed. So, yeah, but
Can you give me a little more context? This PID approved in August 2021. I'm seeing some visuals there.
Yeah.
What am I looking at?
So
What are
what
they
was
wanting to
approved
put
was a site entitlement for a development here. It's a mixed use development that has the building on the S-shaped building is not shaped like an S anymore because there is a fault trace through there, but that's an apartment building. That was their kind of phase one. The building's kind of in the middle and towards the left. The left side is Wasatch Boulevard, by the way. Just you're looking west to east from left to right here. It's like 6 retail pads. A couple of those buildings are mixed use with office above retail. The building, I don't know if you can see the mouse. This building here is a hotel, I think 140 room entitled hotel. This square here is a condominium building. The number of units and the massing and density has not been entitled yet. So they do still need to come back through that process. The use itself has been approved as a condominium.
And what's the total percentage of the total gravel pit that will eventually most likely be enacted upon?
This is maybe 10% of the
Okay.
entire site.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
7 phases.
Yeah.
So a question I would have is related to the tax increment. So the other, 90% of the gravel pit, would it be necessary to have it with this level of density and commercial value in order to, have it? Let's see, how do I communicate this? So what I'm trying to ask is, I know that in our general plan as it exists now, we show an urban core there, which would increase the population of Cottonwood Heights by approximately 9,000 people. And so my question is, if we went ahead and said, okay, the whole 180 acres or whatever that whole extended area is under one CDRA, then would it be, legally, would we be bound to continue with this level of commercial density and urban core for the remainder if we set it up that way in the immediate future?
I don't think necessarily, because if we did a phased approach to this where you have different property owners, we haven't seen any sort of development plan for the southern acreage. That you could condition that on a future development agreement based on what they come forward with.
I think the question is do you have to continue the same density, look and feel all the way through the entire CRA area? I don't think that's required.
I don't think. Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly not talking about the look and feel, but I am concerned about this level of density for that entirety.
I mean, I don't think you're required to continue that density, density, population, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah,
You
we,
could do the other section of.
yeah, and it's a great question. It's an important question because this is what the taxing entities are going to ask these types of things. And
Do more of this or something.
And I think what you can do, like Mike has suggested, and you could phase it and say, we know what the first phase is going to be looking like and what the proposal is, create the area. And then as we get developers in the second or third phases or whatever, we come back with development agreements to be negotiated on the look and feel and timing and increment amounts. So what we would want to do probably is have a full area approved, but with the opportunity to come back in phases to the taxing entities for approval, which means that there's flexibility in what type of density we have. That makes sense.
Which I think they would want to, because, like a Salt Lake County is very unlikely to contribute to any sort of retail oriented development. If the Southern Gravel Pit comes in as majority retail, they may be less interested in participating as fully, whereas they're very interested in affordable housing and community space and things like that.
Well, I will say in my conversations with the recreation director for Salt Lake County, they're in the midst of putting together their plan for Salt Lake County. And they're, for instance, about, what did he tell me? It was significant, like 60 soccer fields short of what they, Salt Lake County should have. There were other things he said, if Cottonwood Heights is looking to, look at how they would zone and what they might do with some of that acreage. Now is the time to present that to Salt Lake County if it's going to have anything to do with, large areas of, and soccer fields is not a big revenue generator, but, I remain interested in being more creative with the way that we zone and look to land use in that area at the mouth of our beautiful Big Cottonwood Canyon than to see continued, Class A office space and hotels.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. Any other last questions, comments on this? Rockworth, remember, is the developer who did Holiday downtown. So, anyway.
So next step, would you like us to take the preliminary steps and revising a project area and getting, some sort of a budget document put together? Do you want to hear from Rockworth first? yeah, let me know.
I don't really need to hear from them unless you guys need to. I'm in favor of it. That was the plan from the beginning, so.
I would say not if it gets in the way of these other big projects that are on the city's thing, but, I'd like to see, sleds, the general fund, some of that stuff. If you can do all that without, do those, and this doesn't significantly impact them, then I'm talking.
I would like to reinforce what Councilman Bracken just said. I'm really interested in getting sleds finished as soon as possible and, not get ourselves spread too thin and, and
Yeah.
for the staff's sake, frankly. And again, completing the sleds ordinance.
I think that works. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Item 4 is our sole legislative item for this board, which is a item 4.1, consideration of resolution 2023-04, approving a property management agreement for Hillside Plaza. So Matt, are we gonna have you talk about that, Tim, or are we gonna have Mike come back up? Yep, here we go. You give us just some quick background before we vote, Mike.
Yeah, thanks. We had put this out to bid a couple months ago. The initial consulting company was selected to provide the property management service. There were some terms in the contract that we couldn't come to agreement on. So they walked away. We walked away from that deal. We contacted and met with the runner-up from that bid process, and they seem to be qualified and able to perform the property management services that we do really need desperately on that site. Their monthly flat rate cost is actually half of the previous consultant. And we think they could do a good job. So it's KNR Premier Property Management, I think is the company's name, and we're recommending we approve the contract, and then we would take the next few weeks to provide them with all the information, get a property management system set up, and then they would begin effective August 1st would be the goal.
Questions, comments?
So they've agreed to all the parts of the contract, or they've signed their part of it?
They have actually signed a contract document.
I hate it when we approve something and have to come back. and read it.
Yeah, they've signed already.
At this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2023-04, approving a property management agreement for Hillside Plaza.
So moved.
Second,
Motion to approve from Councilmember Bracken and a second from Councilmember Holton. Final questions? And I'll call for the vote. Councilmember Holton,
yes.
Councilmember Bracken,
Yes.
Councilmember Burrell,
Yes,
and I will vote yes.
Use some AI ordinance.
Yeah.
Paula knows how to fix that stuff.
Okay, so item 5 is approval of minutes, and let me just read this real quickly. The minutes of this meeting will be approved through the following process. The agency's secretary promptly will circulate a draft copy of the minutes to the board members. Will then have 3 business days to provide any proposed corrections to the secretary. The secretary will then circulate a revised draft of the minutes to the board members, and the same process will continue until such time as no corrections to the draft minutes have received within the 3 business days review period. Whereupon that draft of the minutes will be deemed approved and will become the final minutes of the meeting. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our CDRA meeting and enter into our business meeting at 7 p.m.
Motion to adjourn.
second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.